Falcon 1-1, taxi, runway
Remember guys, when you
19,
get
hold
in,
short.
left, down, and change your COM 1 and COM switch, COM 1 and COM 2 switches to all the way to the left. Let me know when you guys are set.
3 still in the load screen.
Roger.
4 is loading.
In.
4 is in.
2's in. Where's the COM button exactly?
Okay, left, down.
Yeah.
It's on a panel to the bottom right. It says audio. COM 1, COM 2. Twist them all the way to the left by right clicking.
So we are just turning the volume down.
Yeah, so you're turning off the radio tower. Did you guys do that? Fusion, do you find that?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're just going to do an orientation of the cockpit. We're going to go through every major feature, every important gauge, and just explain what it is. Okay, so starting off, go back to your center screen, and then go all the way to the left and down until you're looking at the page that says canopy jettison and all that crap. It should be like a little oxygen tank to your left. Everyone on that screen?
Yeah, copy.
Okay, so really important things in this area, okay? You have your trim, okay? These, you see the trim knobs where it says manual trim? This is super important because there's many times in the game, and there's many times when you're flying, when you're going to get pinged by like a shilker or something like that, or you're going to get hit by flak, and more often than not, your plane isn't going to explode, it's just going to get crippled, and you're going to have a serious roll, and you're going to be sort of spinning out of control. That's not a death sentence. You can correct that by trimming, and this is the area where you trim. Don't click on any of these things right now, but you know, what you would do is if you wanted to put the left wing down, you'd left click where it says roll trim, and you'd right click to get the right wing down. This is a really important area. I recommend that you guys bind this to either your joystick or the keyboard, or just know what the keyboard commands are to do this, because when your plane's spinning out of control, you're not going to want to have to look over here and make sure that you're also not hitting the ground at the same time. Okay, another really important panel, exterior lighting, which is right to the right of the manual trim panel. Okay, the most important thing here is the master on-off switch. When you do a fence-in, you turn your lights off, your exterior lights off. That's where you're going to do it, is at the switch. Master, you're going to switch it from master to off. Another really important switch, all the way to the top, where it says master off and there's a red piece of plastic on there. That you never want to touch. That is your main engine feed, and if you switch that to off, your engines will literally die, and you have about 4 seconds to refire them before your plane crashes. So do not hit that button. That's all. That's the main thing I wanted to say about that. Okay. What else? Okay, now let's go. Let's see. Where are you? Manual pitch override. Okay, now go right, and you should see your hand on the throttle. Everyone at that screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay. Right above your hands is a switch. It says manual pitch. The I part is cut off. It's override and norm. Don't hit the switch. But what this switch does is, if you get into a flat spin, which is possible if you're dogfighting or if you're trying to pull some crazy G's, you can get into a flat spin.
Well, define a flat spin exactly.
Okay, your aircraft is going to be uncontrollable. You're going to just be spinning or bobbing up and down, and the stick is not going to respond to any inputs. If that happens, you can flip the switch to override, and then you can get out of the spin by just rocking your joystick up and down. There's a really advanced maneuver, and we're not going to be going over how to do this today, but I just want you guys to know where this switch is, so that if you get into a flat spin, you can at least try to save yourself. Okay, above that is your alternate gear release. That grayish blue thing with the little white button in the center. That's your alternate gear release. And what that's for is sometimes your gear you won't be able to lower your gear because they got shot. Like the mechanism which lowers your gear might be shot, it might be damaged, and you can't lower your gear with your regular gear lowering lever. So that is for an emergency, and it's sort of a last-ditch effort to lower your gear. If your gear don't lower, then you have to do a belly landing or you have to eject. Okay. Okay, the speed brake indicator. You see it says speed brake, and there's like some horizontal white and black lines. That is not a button, it's just a display. It's telling you if your speed brake is on or off. You should have your speed brake bound to your joystick. If you don't, it's B on the keyboard. When you toggle your speed brake to on, it's going to replace those white and black lines with a series of white dots on a black background. And if you guys want, you can do it right now. You can toggle your speed brake. It won't break anything. Just know that what it looks like and where it is. Sometimes you'll get disoriented. You might put on your speed brake during a dogfight or whatever, and you might just lose track of if it's on or off. If you try to pull serious G's with your speed brake on, you'll lose speed like crazy, and it'll almost feel like you're, like you have your gear down almost. Okay, super important area to the right of the speed brake is your ECM panel, okay? This panel controls your jammer, your RWR, and your MWS. It also, most importantly, controls what program your chaff and flare is on. So that's the most important thing that you should know about this area, is just the various programs of chaff and flare and what they do, okay? So everyone see the program knob and then 1, 2, 3, 4? That will tell, whenever you press chaff or flare, it doesn't just release one chaff or one flare. It launches the program. It does whatever program you have selected. So for instance, if you have program 1 selected, it's only going to pop chaff, and it's going to do chaff in 3 sequences of 3 chaff pellets each. Okay? If you have program 2 on, it's going to do chaff and flare in alternating amounts, but it's mostly going to do flare. And if you do program 3, it's all chaff, again, like program 1, but it's 4 sequences of 2 each, rather than 3 sequences of 3 each. Program 4 is arguably the best program for general purpose flying, because it's a longer program that lasts about 10 seconds, and it evenly pops chaff and flare over that time. It's a really good program if you're ingressing for an attack, and you just press that once, and by the time you're done with your attack run, you're pretty much, the program's done. Does anyone not know the difference between chaff and flare? Or what chaff and flare even is? Okay. So, diagonally left of that is the stores config switch. It says Cat 1 and Cat 3. This switch is going to basically, it's going to basically tell your aircraft's computer how many G's and how fast you can safely go. Because the F-16 is fully electronic. There's no, you can manually set your flaps, but it's done automatically. And all the flight controls are done automatically. So when you move your stick, you're not actually, it's not connected to flight controls. It's telling the computer what to do. So by default, if you're in Cat 3, you can't pull more G's than, you can't pull that many G's. The computer will just not let you do it. And you can damage your aircraft if you pull over a certain amount of G's. If you're on Cat 1, your aircraft's much more maneuverable. But you can only be on Cat 1 if you don't have anything on your inner pylons, your inner weapon pylons, be it bombs, Mavericks, fuel tanks, whatever. Once those stations are clear, either from you jettisoning them or from you using the weapons, you can then go to Cat 1. And what you'll find is that if you, let's say you do a bombing pass and you use all your bombs, you're going to get a master caution light. And what that means is that you can change it to Cat 1. It's basically just telling you, okay, there's nothing on your inner wings. Why are you flying around at Cat 3? So I know that's a little confusing and it's a long explanation, but does everyone understand the basic concept of the stores config switch?
Yep.
Okay. So next thing. Okay, diagonally right of the stores config switch, there is a picture of your aircraft with some green dots. That is a representation of your wheels. If your wheels were up, if your gear was up, then that would not be lit. And a telltale sign that you've taken combat damage is when you press G to lower your gear when you're coming in for a landing and you check down and those lights are not lit. That means that your gear didn't lower and you need to try your alternate gear release. And if that doesn't work, then you got to do a belly landing. Okay, left of that is a emergency jettison button. You have to hold it down in order for it to release. If you do
the yellow and white area.
Yeah, it says it's cut off, but it should say stores jettison. It's got a little white button in the middle, covered by like a screen and yellow things going through it.
Yeah, I gotcha.
That, if you hold that button down, it will drop all inner pylon stores, which are bombs and fuel tanks. And that's really important if you're in a dogfight. If you get jumped by MiGs at close range, you want to immediately jettison your stores because you're much less maneuverable when you have stores on. You can also emergency jettison via keyboard shortcut by holding down Control J. Again, don't do that now. Okay, one more thing. See that the large brown knob diagonally down to the right? That is your gear release. That's your regular gear release. You would just click that and it would bring the gear up or down. You can also do that on your keyboard by pressing G. Okay, so that's... Oh, and I think that's everything there. Okay, now go ahead and just press right on your hat. You should see the top of your knees, the clipboards, and all the main panels. Okay, we're just going to go through everything here because all this shit is really important, okay? Let's start at the bottom of the guy's crotch, okay? That compass-looking thing there, that's called an HSI. That is basically an analog computerized version of your navigation computer. So if your MFDs, if your avionics, like your MFDs and all that shit, if that gets shot out, you can still fly the flight plan, usually, unless your plane is really fucked up, by using the HSI. What you're looking at there is you're looking at a representation of your plane that's in the center of the HSI, and then the white triangle on the edge of the edge of the compass, that's telling you the direction of your flight plan. So, for instance, right now you should see your plane basically looking towards the east, and then to the southeast at 150 you should see a white triangle. So if you wanted to fly the flight plan without your HUD or your avionics, you could still fly your flight plan by making sure that your aircraft is pointing towards the white triangle. What else? Another important thing in this area is the Tack and navigation knob to the left of that. I'm not going to explain what Tack and navigation is. It's sort of an advanced topic, but just know where it is, know where the knob is. Above that area, you see climb and dive. That is an artificial horizon and a angle of attack indicator. So if the yellow thing is basically a representation of your wings. So if the yellow thing is below the horizon, where the brown and white meets, that means that you're doing a dive and you're heading towards the ground. Left of that is your angle of attack gauge. That is basically going to tell you how many degrees your nose is pitching, and it's pretty important for well, if you wanted to make a textbook perfect landing, you would reference that gauge, because it's like, I think it's like 3 degrees nose down is a perfect angle of attack for a landing. I think it's 3 degrees. Anyway, it's not that important. Just know where the gauge is. Okay, above that in the center.
Wait, 1 second.
Okay.
So when you guys say like nose up, nose down, you want to look at that, and then that 0.5 is obviously a degree.
No. You're gonna want to use your HUD. These are all analog. These are analog controls, so that if your HUD dies, this is what you're gonna be looking at, because your HUD can die. You can get shot. Your avionics can get fucked up. In which case, you're gonna look at this stuff. Like, for instance, the climb and dive indicator in the artificial horizon. It's useless if you have a HUD, because you just use your HUD. But if you don't have a HUD, especially if it's at night and you lose your HUD, you need to use this shit, otherwise you're going to die. So that's why we're going over this stuff. So do you understand that? Okay.
Yeah.
So above the climb and dive gauge, 2 extremely important gauges. You have your airspeed indicator, airspeed gauge on the left. That's in hundreds of knots, so if it says 7, it's 700 knots. When you're flying, you're going to see that there's going to be a second number inside the actual gauge. That's going to be telling you what Mach you're going. Right of that is your altitude indicator, and that's in thousands of feet. Okay, all the way to the left now. On the left side, you see master arm. You need to switch that to up if you're going to be releasing any weapons. By default, it's on off. This way you don't kill anyone by accident. Whenever you do a Fenton check, you're going to want to put your master to arm. Okay. Above that, you have your laser arm switch. You need to arm that if you're going to be using laser-guided bombs. Above that is ECM display. That isn't a button. It's just a display telling you if your jammer's on or off. If your jammer's on, it's going to say ENBL enable, and it's going to be highlighted green. Above that is RF norm and RF silent. This is a switch that lets you kill your radar. There's some instances where you want to turn off your radar. This way you're difficult to detect. Because right now, if you check out your RWR, you probably see a bunch of 16s and hear a bunch of chirping noises, right? Well, if you turn your radar off, you're not going to make chirping noises. You're going to be silent. And that's really useful if you're doing a super dangerous, low-altitude raid on a target, and you don't want to be detected by radar. You don't want to give away your passive radar signatures. You turn your RF, you change it from RF norm to silent.
Where is this button exactly?
It's on the left side of your cockpit.
Oh, okay, I see.
Diagonally right of laser arm.
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, now all the way to the right side of the cockpit, you see some gauges there, okay? NOZ pause, that's nozzle position, okay? And it goes from 0 to 100. If your nozzle position is above 0, it means that you're using your afterburner. When you're on the ground, it's at 10, but that's just the way it is. When you get into the air, it'll be at 0. And that's percentage of afterburner. So if it's above 0, you're burning. Below that is your engine RPMs and percentage, okay? Flight idle, which means basically your engine is idling, but it's not active, is 70%. If you're below 70%, then your engines are malfunctioning and they might explode, actually. If they're below 70, and you have a simultaneous temperature increase, you need to kill your engines and try to glide or eject or something. But when you're below 70, that indicates an engine problem, so just be aware of that. If you go at 100, that's called mill power, also known as maximum power. And if you go above 100, you're going to be burning. you're going to be using your afterburner. Below that is FTIT, okay? That's your temperature gauge. That's your temperature in hundreds of Celsius. So, fucking above 10, above 9.5, 95, or 950 Celsius, above that is considered to be malfunctioning. So, flight idle would be 700, and up to like 1,000-ish is fine. Anything above that and you're having problems, just know where that gauge is. It's really important, especially after you get hit. If you get hit by ground fire and you hear a bunch of beeps and alarms, you should always check your temperature and your RPMs and make sure your engine isn't going to explode. Okay, under the temperature gauge there is a compass. That is really important. It's one of the only compasses in your aircraft. If your HSI is fucked up, or if your avionics are fucked up, that is the only way you're going to know where you're heading. So just know where that is. Right now it's on east because we're facing east. Right of that is your fuel in poundage. It's in pounds. If you by default your computer will report bingo, which means maximum amount of fuel before you have to RTB, or correction, lowest amount of fuel before you can safely RTB. By default, your computer will report bingo at 1,500 pounds, but that can be customized at will. Okay. Now, at the top of the cockpit, you should see on the right side, the top right of the cockpit, you have a climb and dive indicator. That's another artificial horizon. It's the exact same thing as the thing in your crotch. It's just there for redundancy. This way you don't have to look down too much when you're flying around if your instruments go out. To the right of that, very important gauge, fuel flow. Okay? Sometimes you'll get disoriented in combat and you might have your afterburner on for too long. You'll know that your afterburner's on even if you're not checking your RPM gauge, because the fuel flow will be through the roof. It will go from like 5,000 to like 30,000. And what that fuel flow is telling you, what the number is, it's the amount of pounds of fuel you will use in an hour at your current speed, altitude, and heading. Okay, go ahead and just hat up. You should now see your HUD and just the top of the cockpit. Okay, the top right of your cockpit, okay, there's a little screen there that says UHF package STPT1, okay? This is called your DED, and this is a really important screen because it's connected with, if you want to customize stuff on your aircraft while you're in flight, you're going to be entering stuff into your ICP, which is the keyboard in the center, and you're going to be looking at your DED for what you're inputting, okay? So by default, your DED is going to be displaying what radio comm channel you're on, what steer point you have selected, and your current clock, what time it is. Okay, and as you click stuff on your ICP, that will change and it will say different stuff. So those two things are connected. Your ICP is connected to your DED. We're going to come back to the ICP in a second. First, I want to go left of that to that green circle with the numbers in it. That is the single most important thing in your entire cockpit. This is the RWR. It's also pronounced RAW. This gauge, it's known as a radar warning receiver. What it does is it's a passive sensor that detects incoming radar pings, and it will tell you the approximate direction of the incoming radar signature, and it can also try to identify it. One really important thing about the RWR, most of you probably already know what I just said, but you probably don't know what I'm about to say. The RWR does not calculate range. It can give you an approximate range, but all it's useful for is telling you threat. So, here's an example, okay? An SA-10. An SA-10 is one of the most dangerous SAMs you can ever be engaged by. If the 10 is inside of the circles, it doesn't mean that the SAM is right next to your aircraft. It means that it's lethal to you. So you shouldn't use this for range. All it represents is how dangerous the radar contact is. So if I'm just going to go through the circles now. If it's outside of the two inner circles, that means that it cannot fire upon you. It's outside of its maximum engagement range for weapons. If it's inside the first circle from the outside, that means that it's within threat range. It can fire on you. If it's inside the inner circle in the center, that means that it's extremely dangerous, and it's within like short range missile range, heater range, and guns maybe. It can engage you with guns. That's real bad news if you see it in the center circle. It's pretty much, you're dead at that point. The RWR, though, although it doesn't tell you the exact range, it does tell you the bearing, and that's the most important thing, is the bearing to the contact. So does everyone understand that it doesn't tell you the range, it just tells you the danger status of whatever is pinging you? I just want to make sure that everyone understands that point. Okay. You got that, Fusion? You understand that?
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, we're almost done going over the cockpit stuff. Now what we're going to do is we're going to go right and then down. And you should now see your joystick. And you should see some other stuff on the right. Okay, really important in this screen, this yellow thing between your legs that says pull to eject. This is how you eject. You can also eject by holding down Control E. But if you wanted to eject by pulling it inside the cockpit, you would click on that lever and you'd hold down the button. Okay, to the right side of this view, really important, is your EPU fuel gauge. It's diagonally right of your joystick. If your engine dies, you have an emergency fuel source called EPU fuel, okay? This is going to last for 10 minutes tops. Once the EPU fuel is out, you are now a glider. You no longer have power. And the F-16 cannot fly without a computer. It's dependent on the computer. If your computer is dead, if the EPU fuel is 0 and your engine is dead, you are going to crash. So just be aware of where this EPU fuel gauge is. It will give you an idea of how much time you have left. If your engine dies, for whatever reason, you should try to get on a course so you're going to glide into a landing and just do it before EPU fuel dies. Okay, diagonally right to the bottom of that is a clock. And that's the only clock in this entire aircraft other than your one on your DED. So just know where that is. If your DED gets fucked up, this is where you're going to find the time. Under that is radar altimeter. Okay, so your radar altimeter is a device that tells you your current altitude from the ground level. So by default, your aircraft is only going to tell you your true altitude. It's not going to tell you your altitude from the ground. So, for instance, let's go up to our HUD. Actually, it's not going to work because we're on the fucking ground. But, alright, go back to the radar altimeter thing. By default, if your altitude says like 500 or whatever, that's telling you your altitude in general. It's not telling you your altitude from the ground. So in order to get your altitude from the ground, you need to turn on your radar altimeter. It takes about 5 minutes to boot up, so it's on standby by default when you start the game. So to put that, to start booting it up, just left click it once and it will go up. And then when it's good to go, you just click it. Like after 5 minutes, you click it one more time, so the switch is all the way up, and then your radar altimeter is going to be active. Okay. And then under your altitude on your HUD, you're going to see another rectangular box, and that's going to tell you your altitude from the ground. By default, if your radar altimeter is off, it's just going to be an empty rectangular box. It won't give you any information. Okay. Okay, now back to the center view. We're going to go over the ICP. So, this keyboard in the center, under your HUD, this is called the ICP. This is a keyboard that you use to enter data into your computer. For instance, if you want to set up a precision target with an exact longitude and latitude, you would use the ICP. If you wanted to customize your bingo setting, when your computer is going to tell you that you're bingo and you need to RTB, you do it through the ICP. If you want to set up, if you want to customize your HUD, you do it through the ICP. You can do all sorts of things through the ICP. You can customize the color of the HUD, you can dim the HUD, you can do all sorts of things. So we're just going to go over some big features of the ICP, okay? The top left knob on the ICP, it's a white scroller wheel. If you right or left click that, that's going to dim your HUD. Okay?
COM 1?
No, left of that. Where it says SYM. You left right click that.
Oh, okay.
It'll dim and highlight your HUD. That's good. That's actually pretty important because if it's low light conditions, if your HUD is too bright, it can actually sort of blind you, and it's going to be hard to fly. So just know where that is. The main menu options of the ICP are those black buttons at the top. The inputs, where you're actually going to be putting stuff in, those are the blue buttons, the light blue buttons. So let's go ahead and click the button list, and then click 0, 8, 0. And then what you should see is on your DED, it should say bullseye and should be lit up green. Does anyone not have that? Okay. Now what you're going to do is click return by left clicking on the switch under the buttons, under 8 and 9. Left click and you should see the switch go to the left, and then your DED should return to the default view. Okay, now what we just did is we enabled the bullseye to appear in the bottom left of your HUD and also in your MFDs. Now, what a bullseye is, which some of you may not know what a bullseye is, so I'm just going to go over that. A bullseye is an arbitrary position picked anywhere on the map in the area of operations that is used as a reference point for positions. So, they don't use grids in aviation, and the reason for that is if your comms get intercepted, whoever's listening is going to know what you're talking about. So in order to keep security, ComSec, you use a bullseye position. What the bullseye is, it's 6 numbers. It's 2 sets of 3 numbers, rather, okay? The first number is bearing, okay? The second number is range. So, bullseye 099176. That means bearing 099 to the bullseye at 176 miles. The bullseye is extremely important because it's what you use for everything when you're flying. It's how you report contacts. It's how you refer to your own position. It's how you refer to other people's positions and who's in your flight, okay? So, again, in order to put on the bullseye onto your HUD and onto your IC and onto your MFDs, it's list 080, and it's going to show the bullseye in the bottom left of your HUD and on the bottom left of your MFDs. Okay, one more thing we're going to go over on the ICP is the cruise page, okay? So, in the center of your ICP where it says 5, go ahead and click that, okay? This page is really important, okay? The first thing it's showing is system. That's your current time. That's your current time in, what time it is in the day, okay? Under that is your destination time on station. That is what time you should be at the current steer point that you have selected. So if we're flying a flight plan and it's really coordinated and we're doing like a complicated attack and we want everyone to be on station at the same time, otherwise things go wrong. For instance, if you have a seed strike, you have a seed escort and a seed strike. You have one flight that is bombing SAMs and another site that is escorting them. If the seed escort doesn't come, if they don't arrive at the right time, the seed strike can be totally fucked over by MiGs or pop-up SAMs, whatever. So it's really important to remain on time. That's destination time on steer. And under that is ETA. Okay, that's the ETA to the steer point at your current airspeed and your current heading. It considers all of that. It considers all the inertial factors of your aircraft. Under that is your required speed in order to get there on time. Okay, so right now, if we wanted to get to steer point 1 on time, we'd have to go 1,007 knots, which is pretty much impossible. Okay, go ahead and click the cruise button again. You're now going to see some other important information, okay? It's going to tell you your current fuel to reach, it's going to tell you the fuel to reach the steer point. It's going to tell you the wind, the current wind, the bearing of the wind, and how fast it's going. So right now the wind's moving slightly southwest. It's bearing 196 at 5 knots. If you click the cruise page again, this is a really important page, okay? This is cruise home. This is going to tell you, if at your current speed and your current inertial conditions and heading and all that, how much fuel it's going to take you to get to home plate. So if you've been flying around and you're worried that you might not have enough fuel to get home, you can use this page to determine your current fuel, or not your current fuel, but how much fuel you'll have by the time you reach home plate. It also tells you the optimum operating altitude to fly in order to maximize your fuel economy. So if you have low fuel and you're in danger of running low on fuel, you should always be at optimum altitude. It's usually really high, because the higher you are, the more fuel, the less fuel you burn. It's harder to maneuver at high altitudes, and it's harder to gain speed. But once you get up at altitude, you burn a lot less fuel because the air's thinner. Okay. All right. Go ahead and click return on your ICP. The return switch by just left clicking there. Okay. So now we've gone over everything that what you need to know in the cockpit. I think one more thing. Okay, yeah. So we've gone over everything that we need to go over in the cockpit. Okay. Now we're going to be going over the HUD and the MFDs.
Quick question.
Yes.
Just wondering what canopy jettison does.
That's not implemented. I don't think that's for like emergency rescues and stuff. But I'm pretty sure that's not implemented in the game, so don't worry about it. You'll never use it. It's if like your emergency bolts don't launch or you're unable to eject or whatever. Use that, but it's not implemented in the game. All right, so now we're going to talk about the HUD. Okay. All right, so features of the HUD starting from the left. Hold on a second, I need some water here. Okay. Features of the HUD starting from the left. You have a rectangular box in the left center of the HUD, okay? That's your current airspeed in knots. Yeah, it's your current airspeed in knots. To the right of that is this little tape, like these little lines, okay? That's known as your speed tape. That's basically a visual representation of your destination time on steer. And what you'll find is that when you're flying around, you'll see a little caret, and if the caret is above the C, if it's physically above the C, that means that you're behind schedule, and if the caret is below the C, it means you're ahead of schedule. So you always want to fly with the caret in the center of your airspeed indicator, and that's just telling you that your destination time on steer is on schedule and that you're on the flight plan. Above that, where it says 1.0. That is how many G's you're pulling, okay? We're pulling 1 G right now because we're on Earth and we're not doing anything crazy, like going crazy, okay? once you go above like 8 Gs, you're starting to over-G the aircraft, but the Falcon pretty much will never be damaged by pulling too many Gs. Not in any serious way, at least. Okay, the bottom left of the HUD. CCR, okay, what it's telling you there is it's telling you your current mode that you have selected. So it could say like CCRP, nav, it could tell you MRM. CCRP is a bombing mode, MRM is medium range missile, nav is navigation mode, etc. Below that is your current bullseye position of your aircraft. Okay, the center of the HUD, the center top of the HUD, that is your current bearing. So right now we're bearing 084, and that's the compass, digital compass. Below that, you should see a line, horizontal line going through the middle of your screen. That is a horizontal. That's a artificial horizon. Another feature is this big circle with 3 lines coming out of it: left, right, and center, or left, right, and up. You can't see the lines going left to right because right now it's resting on the artificial horizon. But that is telling you that symbol is called a meatball, and that shows you exactly where the nose of your aircraft is pointing. It's extremely useful, and for instance, if the meatball is on the center of the runway, all right, let's say you're landing, okay? The meatball, you put the meatball in the center of the runway. That's telling you that your nose is headed directly for the center of the runway. Even if visually it doesn't look like it, it doesn't matter. The meatball is God, and it always is correct. So if it's not correct, then your HUD won't work. So always rely on the meatball. Even if it looks like you're not on course, if the meatball is on top of whatever you're trying to get to, then you're on course, okay? Another HUD symbol is the tadpole, and that's a little circle with 1 line coming out of it. That is telling you the current bearing to the steer point that you have selected, okay? If you want to remain on the flight plan, you need to put the meatball on top of the tadpole. When you're on top of the tadpole, the line will be vertically up, and that means that you're flying on task. If you're flying away from the flight plan, the tadpole line will be either off to the side or behind you, depending on how far off you are from the flight plan. Center of the HUD, okay? This is known as a ladder. Okay, all these lines with the numbers, 5, 10, all this is known as a ladder, okay? This is basically telling you your angle on your nose, okay? So if the hash lines, like the hash lines, that's below the horizon, and solid lines are above the horizon. You can't see the solid lines right now because we're parked. But, so if your meatball is on the 5, that means that your nose is headed 5 degrees nose down, okay? If the meatball's in between the 5 and the artificial horizon, that means that you are at 2.5 degrees nose down. So if the flight lead says, all right, we're going to nose down 10 degrees, that means you need to pitch down your aircraft until the meatball's on the 10, below the artificial horizon. So everything, all the navigational stuff, you reference the meatball. Okay. Right side of the HUD, okay, that's your current altitude. When you're below 1,000 feet, you're going to see this sort of, it's going to look like a little ladder, or a little tape, like the speed tape on the left, okay? Right now we're at 300 feet, I think. Yeah, I think we're at 300 feet, okay? When you go above 1,000 feet, that's going to be replaced by a rectangular box that's going to have the amount of feet, the current altitude in feet. And also you'll see your radar altimeter box will pop up, and you'll see another rectangle below that that tells you your current altitude from the ground. Okay. Below that, AL 300, that is your altitude. It's just a number, okay? It's just telling you your altitude in a number. Below that is your fucking B, and then the whatever that is your range to your current steer point or target in miles. I actually think that that might be in feet. Yeah, I think that's in feet. If it says B014, that's That's because we're 14 feet from the steer point. Go ahead and press S on your keyboard, and you'll find that that changes to B045.4. That's 45.4 nautical miles, and the number below that is the time to the destination at your current speed. Right now it's XXX. That's because we're going 0 knots and we're not moving. When you start moving, that will change to whatever time it takes in minutes and seconds to get to the target at your current speed. That's the basics of the HUD. Any questions on the HUD or any questions about anything we've gone over so far?
I'm good.
Okay. Okay, next thing we're going to go over is the MFDs. We're going to go over these very briefly. We're going to go over them in more depth in the second part of the training. We're just going to go over them very briefly right now just to introduce you to some basic features. So these little screens, these colored screens right above your knees, these are called MFDs, okay? Multifunction display. Your MFDs control your weapon systems and they control your navigation systems. They control all your avionics. 9 times out of 10 you're going to be using your MFDs for doing stuff, okay? On your right MFD by default, before I even talk about that, let's talk about the format of the MFDs, okay? So what are you looking at here, okay? You're looking at a bunch of buttons, okay? Those buttons correspond, the buttons surrounding the MFDs, they correspond to the menu item right next to it. So for instance, on your right MFD, you should currently have the HSD highlighted, okay? On the bottom right of your MFD, it should say HSD, it should be highlighted green. That means that you're currently in HSD mode. If you were to click the button to the left of that, then it would go to SMS, okay?
Oh, Kraus!
What?
I love you.
Fuck off. So, if you...
Sweet nothings in my ear.
So if you click under those items, it switches to various pages on your MFDs, okay? So the buttons correspond to items on your MFDs. Okay, another thing that's quite important. The top left of each MFD has a thing to dim and brighten your MFDs. So you should see there, top left of your right MFD, there's a button that dims your MFD. There's also a button that's sort of hidden above that, and that will brighten your MFD, okay?
The little green button?
No. Okay, the button's on the outside of your MFD, okay? The top left. Okay, you see where the little...
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, you see where the little bolt is on the bottom right of your ICB?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay, right near there, you can brighten and dim your MFD, okay? Okay, another thing. These buttons on the outside, they're called OSB buttons. Okay, so just... If someone says, like, OSB 1, that means the top left button on the MFD clockwise, okay? Okay, that's pretty much it for the format of the MFDs. Now we're going to go over what the MFDs are, okay? The left MFD, by default, is going to have your FCR, okay? That's your fire control radar. By default, it's going to be in air-to-air mode. Your FCR has 2 different modes, okay? It has air-to-air mode and has air-to-ground mode. We're going to be going over that in more depth following this. Okay, your right MFD by default is going to have your stores config and your navigation stuff. The HSD is basically it contains your flight plan. It contains your data link, which is basically all the data that's shared by everyone else in your flight, and it contains updates from the AWACS and the JSTARS on possible SAM threats and other things that are going on in the campaign. It will also include the FLOT. The FLOT is the forward line of troops. It's represented as a gray line on the MFD. You're not going to see it now because we're not near the FLOT. But that's also updated by JSTAR and AWACS integration. Another really important thing other than the HSD is the SMS. click SMS right now, it will tell you what stores you have on your aircraft. So it's basically a representation of your wings. So it's left and right wings, and it goes from the inner stations out. So, for instance, we have 3 Mark 82s per wing, and an AIM-9 Lima, AIM-9 Lima M, which is an AIM-9 Mike, and we have what is that? We have 2 AIMRAMs, or correction, we have 2 AIMRAMs on our right wing and 1 AIMRAM on our left wing. Do you guys understand that? Oh, and then also, it tells you how many Gs you can pull in Cat 3 in the center, where it says Cat 3 and then 5.5 Gs. That's telling you how many Gs you can pull with your current loadout. And the top left of that SMS page shows you how many guns you have. So where it says 05 gun, that's telling you, I think that's 500 rounds of 20 millimeter gun. Okay, back to the HSDs. We're going to explain the HSDs, then we're going to finally get some flight time, okay? I'm just going to go over every feature of the HSD, because this is a really important feature of your aircraft, okay? Like I said, the HSD is going to tell you your flight plan. It's going to tell you where SAMs are. It's going to tell you where the FLOT is. It's also going to tell you where your steer points are, and it's also, most importantly, it's going to have a data link with all the other members of your flight, and it's going to show you where the guys in your flight are and their current altitude, okay? So the bottom left of the MFD has 2 different things. It has your current radar cursor's bullseye position, which is the top numbers that are in blue, and below that it has your current bullseye. Okay? The bearing to the bullseye is in that circle. There shouldn't be anything there because it's fucked up. Below that should be the range to the bullseye. Okay, the top left buttons where it says 15 or it might say 30, I don't know what it is by default. That's your current resolution of the HSD, okay? So if it says 15, then that means that you're looking at 15 miles. And each ring in the HSD is a third of that range. So if you have it set for 30, that means that the inner ring is 10 miles, the next ring is 20 miles, the third ring is 30 miles, okay? Same thing for 60, then the inner ring will be 20 miles and 40 miles and 60 miles, okay? The shorter the range, or the shorter the resolution on your HSD, the easier it is to see your flight, because your flight's usually within 15 to 30 miles. Okay, really important feature. Top center button where it says norm. That means that you're at normal zoom, but you can expand the view of your HSD, and I highly recommend this for when you're trying to keep formation, okay? If you click that, it will say EXP1, then it will go to EXP2, and you can click it again, it will go back to normal. So if you're trying to fly formation, you expand the HSD, then you'll be able to see the people in your flight around you. Right now, we're right on top of each other. We're within like 100 meters. So you're not going to be able to see anything. It's just going to be a mass of blue numbers. But when we get airborne, you're going to see, like, for instance, I'm number 1 in the flight. So you'll see 1, and then under 1, you'll see the altitude that I'm at. So it's say 1 and then 15 means number 1 is over there, and he's at 15,000. Another really important feature of the MFD is go ahead and zoom out to like 60 miles. You'll see this blue cone coming out from your aircraft, okay? That's showing you your radar. Because your radar works like a searchlight, okay? It has a limit on how far it can go and the angle where it can scan, okay? So that is pretty much a graphical representation of what your radar is scanning. So if there's a contact outside of that cone, it's literally invisible to you. The only way you're going to see it is if you get a ping on your RWR, if it's scanning you actively. That's pretty much it for the HSD. So that's all we're going to go over right now for the MFDs. What I want to do now is I want to get airborne, and I want to go over formations and flying the flight plan. Fusion, this is mainly just for you, because I know the other guys know how to do flight plan and they know how to do formations. So, do you want to do this? I mean, it's completely up to you.
Yeah, it's all good.
You do want to do it?
Yeah.
Okay. So, now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to say one really important thing. This is a general note for everyone, okay? When you're flying, you're gonna feel an urge to like stare at your instruments, okay? You shouldn't do that. You should really appreciate your eye. Looking around, you know, the F-16 has one of the most amazing features, and that's a completely glass cockpit, okay? It allows you almost 360-degree view of your surroundings, which is a unique feature of the F-16. The F-22 and the F-35, they have it too, but they're not in active service. This is the only aircraft in active service that actually has a fully glass cockpit and lets you see almost 360 degrees. So when we're in the air and you don't know where someone is, just look around. Don't fixate on your instruments and don't fixate on the displays, because if you do that, you're going to die. Worst comes to worst, just fucking look around and use your eye, okay? Another thing that's really important is the importance of staying with your wingman. So when we take off, and when you're flying in formation, it doesn't matter what your wingman or what your leader says, what the element lead says. You always should be glued to his wing. So if he banks left, you should bank left. If he banks right, you should bank right. He shouldn't have to say anything. I mean, he should say something for courtesy so you know what's going on. But the bottom line is your job as a wingman is not to navigate. I'm just going to stress that again. As a wingman, your job is not to navigate. Your job is to stick on your leader's wing, okay? The element leader is doing the navigation. So if the flight lead's leading the entire flight in navigation, the second element leader, he's leading his wingman. He's doing some navigation, but it's mostly just following the flight leader. And this is pretty much like commanding a mission in ARMA. The mission commander is the flight leader. He tells everyone what's going on. And the only time you're going to take initiative in maneuvering is when you're in combat. But if you're flying in formation, you shouldn't be like trying to declare targets and stuff. You should just be talking to the flight leader, communicating to the flight leader, and the flight leader is going to be calling the shots for the most part. Because if people start doing their own thing, you will die really quick. It's the environment has to be somewhat controlled. So again, I just want to stress: follow your leader and be a good wingman. Make sure that you're on his wing. Make sure that you're okay. For instance, if your leader's going in for an attack run, okay, what should you be doing? You shouldn't be just flying around like a fucking retard. You should be looking for SAM launches, and you should be looking for enemy MiGs coming in. You shouldn't just be flying around in a circle. So like if your leader says, okay, I'm going to go and bomb these targets, I want you to fly cap. That means I want you to make sure that I'm not going to die. Like look for AAA fire, look for SAM launches, look for MiGs, etc. Make sure that your leader survives, and then he'll do the same when you go in for your attack. Okay. Okay, so now that we've gone over all the fucking basics, now we're going to talk about what you do in a takeoff roll, okay? A takeoff roll is pretty much the process of taking off, getting airborne, and getting into formation. It's also known as marshalling, okay? So what you're going to do now so preceding a takeoff is taxiing, okay? We're on the taxiway right now. The taxiway leads from the ramp, and it leads you to the runway. Once you're on the runway, then you do a takeoff, okay? So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be rolling to the end of the taxiway. We're then going to be, normally you'd ask for permission to take off, but we're not going to do that because I don't want to deal with the fucking tower. You'd ask for permission to take off, then you'd roll onto the runway. The air traffic controller would tell you to either wave off or to position and hold. You position, you're cleared for takeoff, then you do the following, okay? You get up to 180 or 190, then you slowly nose up. Once you're off the ground, you raise your gear, and then you just fly the current heading, okay? You don't go to another steer point, don't do any of that shit, just fly the current heading. The flight leader is going to tell you when to bank for the next steer point, okay? Now, how do you taxi, okay? You're going to pump, don't do this now, I'm just going to tell you how to do it, okay? You pump your throttle until it's at like 90%, and when you're doing this, you're holding down your wheel brakes. So you hold down your wheel brakes, then you pump your throttle, that will get your engine on and get your engine going. Once your engine's on, bring it down to like 80%, let go of the wheel brakes, and slowly start rolling. If you're going too fast, if you're going to hit the guy in front of you, just kill your throttle and then hold down your wheel brakes, okay? While you're rolling on the taxiway and on the runway, you use your rudder to turn. And what enables you to do this is nose wheel steering, okay? And you know that your nose wheel steering is active. If you look to the right of your HUD, you should see ARNWS. It should be lit up green. That means that your nose wheel steering is active. When you take off, your nose wheel steering is going to turn off automatically. But when you land, you have to turn on nose wheel steering. So we'll go over that a little bit later. But just know where your nose wheel steering indicator is and know what nose wheel steering is. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to take off. We're going to try to fly some basic formations. There's this 4 formations that we're going to be going over today, okay? We're going to be going over a wedge formation, and we're going to be going over box, 3-ship Vic, and trail. Does anyone not know what those formations are before we take off?
Yes.
Okay. So pretty much what a wedge is, it's just like a wedge in Arma, okay? So the flight lead is on point. Number 2 is to his left, and then number 3 is to his right, and number 4 is furthest to the right, okay? That's what a wedge is. It's pretty simple. A box is, in a box you have element 1, which is the flight lead, and 2. They're in basically a line in the front. And then about a mile behind them, or 2 miles behind them, is the second element, and they're also in a line. So it looks like the corners of a square. This formation is extremely important and very useful, because what will happen in air combat is that you'll spot an enemy contact, okay? And the lead element will engage those contacts, then they'll go defensive. What that means is they'll fire off their missiles, and then they'll turn around, they'll pop, chaff, and flare, they'll get out of the way so the enemy can't engage them. That's called going defensive. Meanwhile, the second element, since they were behind the first element, they're now in a position to attack and cover the first element's going defensive, okay? That's called a grinder. Element 1 will attack and then go defensive. Element 2 will attack and then go defensive. You just keep doing it over and over again until you're out of ordnance. That's called a grinder. That's the most common way and the most effective way and the safest way to do air-to-air combat. You never want to have all your planes in the same position, because then when you go defensive, no one's covering you. So that's bad. So know what a box is. Okay, the next formation is a 3-ship Vic. What this is, it's an upside down T. Okay, number 1 is the top of the top of the T, the upside down T. Number 2 is the bottom left of the upside down T, and number 3 is the bottom right of the upside down T. So if you just imagine an upside down T, like a line coming up, and then the T on the bottom. 1's at the top, 2's on the bottom left, 3's on the bottom right. Okay. Then you have a trail formation. All right. A trail is where you have the first element on point. Okay, and 1 and 2 are going to be like in a wedge. All right. 1 is going to be on point. 2 is going to be diagonally to his left, behind him. Then some distance in trail, usually 1 to 2 miles, is going to be element 2. And they're going to be also in wedge, except number 4 is going to be to the right rather than the left of number 3. So it's going to be wedge left, then a separation, then wedge right. That's called a trail formation.
That's called a wedge cross. trail is just a line, a straight line.
No, that's a file, actually. A file.
I'm just going by Force's thing. There's a trail and a line astern, the only difference being the distance between the planes.
Okay, hold on.
Then a wedge is what you described earlier, which is 1 in the lead, 2 on the left, and then 3 and 4 in a trail in a right wedge.
Or you could call it a fingertip, because it looks just like your fingers.
Okay, my bad. Alright, so... Alright, so Fusion, do you understand that? So, the wedge...
Yeah, I got it all.
Okay. So, the default formation that you're going to do when you take off is going to be a wedge. Just like in ground military, the default formation is a wedge. That's weird that that's calling that a trail, but whatever. I don't care. Alright, so those are the formations. Now we're good to take off. Does anyone not know the formations, or does anyone not know the procedures for a takeoff roll?
What kind of procedure?
So, like I said, you're gonna roll to the end of the taxiway. You're gonna ask permission to take off. They're gonna clear you onto the runway. You're gonna wait to be cleared. Then you're gonna, throttle up to like 100. Then go into afterburner, fully burn. Once you're at 185 to 190, you're gonna nose up slowly, get off the ground, press G, raise your gear, and then fly on your current heading.
Gotcha.
Okay. I just want to do a sit rep with Forrest before we start. Hey, Forrest, can I get a sit rep on your team?
Roger, we are still on the ground, just going over stuff, but we're just taking our merry time.
Okay, yeah, we're still on the ground too. We're about to take off now and do a takeoff roll.
Roger, that's great timing. We're probably about 2 minutes out from that.
Roger that. I'll talk to you later. All right, we're good to go. So
Copy.
I think Andy, you're on point actually.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go ahead and just do a takeoff roll.
Is this the runway we're on now?
No, we're on a taxiway. Like I said, you start off on the taxiway, and then you move to a runway. So what you might want to do right now is just put your HSD to like 15 miles and expand. Just put your HSD to like 15 miles and then expand it. Alright, Andy, if you could just do the proper comms and all that. Or not. Alright, so what you would say is you'd say, you get permission to position and hold, then you would roll onto the runway, and you'd say lead is taking active left. If the lead takes active left, then that means that he's going to be on the left side of the runway, and then number 2 is going to be diagonally behind him to the right. And then the lead will give a, hold on a second. Okay, so the lead's going to say what sort of takeoff he's going to want, okay? He might say we're going to do element takeoffs, or he might say we're going to do a flight takeoff. So right now we're going to do an element takeoff. An element takeoff is when you have 2 ships at a time taking off, okay? So lead just took active left. Now number 2, who's fusion, you should roll up behind me diagonally to my right. Okay?
Okay.
Whoa, slow down. Okay, that's alright. I'm just gonna roll in front of you to show you the proper spacing here. clear for takeoff. Then what you do is the flight lead will say, you know,
How do I do the clear for takeoff then?
well, we're not going to do it now because the tower, we're not using the tower, but it's T and then 7.
Okay.
It's T and then 7 normally, okay? So now what the flight lead would say is, you say rotors up, wheels on, 90%. So you put your, hold down your wheel brake, go up to 90%. And then say ready, 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 and then wheels off, and then start rolling.
Ready, wheels off.
Okay, go ahead, just start rolling. 90%, and then he'll say burn on, and then put your burner on. Stay straight on the runway. Once you reach 185 to 190, you say rotating, which means that your lead's rotating. And then once you're airborne, you say lead, or you say your number 1, 2, airborne. Make sure you raise your gear. And you stay in the burn until you're at 350. You go 10 degrees nose up. Then you come out of the burn, put it on 90%.
4 inactive.
3 in position.
You guys are clear to take off.
Four in position.
So Fusion, just try to get to my left, diagonally to my left. Whoa. Okay, just stay where you are. I'm gonna overtake you. Yeah.
What wants to talk about on the way back?
A
Rotating.
chicken burrito. Oh wait, what time is that? Because I might have to.
Airborne.
Four wheels up.
3 out of the burn.
4 out of burn.
What speed are we going to try to maintain?
Turning towards lead element.
Sorry, I'm back. So where did you go, Fusion? I got a phone call. Had a phone call.
Yeah, I'm to your left, diagonal left. What speed are we trying to maintain?
So we're just going to be at 95% for now. That's fine. And just go to like 5 degrees. Okay, I'm back. Sorry. So you look like, where are you? You should be visible to me. All right, you're actually in a good position. You should be a little bit further out to the left and a little bit closer, but you're pretty much in a good position. Okay, element 1, just bring it down to about 85%. Let the other guys saddle in. Okay, you're good. Don't use your... Fusion, are you using your afterburner, man?
No, I wasn't.
What are you doing?
You just slowed down or something.
Alright, it's fine. Just stay on your current. Okay, just bring down your engine RPMs to 85%.
Tally lead element.
Okay, guys, let's we're gonna shoot for Angels 15.
Copy 15.
What is that exactly?
Okay, so Angels 15 means 15,000 feet. Okay, just an altitude that we're gonna be shooting for. If it's below 1,000 feet, then you use cherubs. Like cherubs 5 means 500 feet. Yeah, so, like I said, you just expand the HSD. It will show you everyone really close, and you'll be able to keep formation easier, I think.
How do I expand the HSD exactly?
Top middle button, where it says norm, click it twice.
One say speed.
313. Let's bring it up to 320 knots. Let's try to get information here. Fusion's all fucked up back there.
Yeah, I'm setting up right now.
Slowing up, boys. Sorry.
Okay, leads at 307 knots. Angels 15 plus 5. Heading 113. Okay, that's pretty good fusion right there. That's pretty much. Just make sure you use your eyes though. Okay, don't focus too much.
Yeah,
on the
that's what I'm doing right now.
Okay, so we're pretty much in a good formation, I think. Where is number 3?
3 and 4 and a finger 4. 4 is overshot just a little bit. He's pulling back in position.
Okay. Alright, guys.
We were going a little fast.
Let's go ahead and level off. Leads at 316 knots. Angels 15 plus 5. Okay, so flying information, it's just going to be a thing that you're going to have to practice. It's not really trainable. I mean, we could just do it for hours, but it would be really boring. So, one tip though for keeping formation is you could soft lock. You could use your radar to lock onto the lead, and then if you do that, you'll get his current airspeed. So you won't have to constantly ask him for his airspeed. So I didn't want to go into the FCR until the next training phase, but I guess we could just go over this now. Fusion. You should see a little yellow box in the bottom of your FCR on the left MFD.
Yeah, I know how to do soft lock.
Okay, go ahead and soft lock me up, and you'll see my airspeed in the top right.
Okay, I lost it.
If you can't do it, that's fine. We'll just go over it next time.
Yeah, I did it.
Okay, so now you see I'm going 329 knots. We're nice and level. I'm at 90%, or correction, like 88% throttle. What else? Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna bank left for steer 2, so we get on the pit. So we get on the tadpole. So go ahead and press S. Go ahead and press S on your keyboard to switch to steer point 2. Then we're gonna bank slowly to the left, and keep in mind you should be looking at the flight lead to see what speed you should be turning. Okay, we're gonna bank slowly to the left, so we get the meatball on top of the tadpole. Tally your flight for us.
That's actually looking really good, guys, from where I am.
Hey, we have the friendly flight to our 10 o'clock, so just don't hit into them, okay? Okay, so now you should see that, if you're informational, you should see that your
Rouse
meatball...
Force, sorry, did you say something?
Your meatball's on top of the tadpole. I just said hi because we tallied your flight.
Copy that. We're we're actually rolling now. I'm going to start the roll.
Does everyone see that?
3.
4.
Okay, cool. So now we're flying the flight plan. Okay, now we can see that carrot that I was talking about, okay? Top left of your HUD. You see under where it says 1.0 or whatever your G is? That is, you see a little carrot that's on the speed tape? That's telling us that we are behind schedule, okay? If we were on schedule, then the carrot would be on the airspeed. It would be where the C is. And if we were above schedule, or ahead of schedule, then the carrot would be in front of the C, below it. Does everyone understand that?
Yep.
Okay. That's
4 leads at 340.
Yep, I'm at 338, pushing the 340. That's pretty much everything that I wanted to go over in this part of the training. I can't think of much else. I mean, just is there anything that any of you guys are uncomfortable with as far as flying is concerned, or anything that you don't understand as far as just flying and maneuvering? Is there anything that you are unfamiliar with, or you have any questions about?
I'm kind of uncomfortable when Morphine looks at me with those bedroom eyes.
Well, that's for the O Club, of course. Oh, one HUD symbol that we didn't go over because we couldn't do it while we were on the ground is the steer point indicator on the HUD. Okay, you see the diamond on your HUD? It should be sort of by the horizon. It's that diamond right above the horizon. That is showing you the position of the steer point that we're headed to. So right now, we are 54 miles approximately from the steer point, and it's that little diamond. Everyone see the diamond?
I see it.
Copy that.
Okay, cool. So now if we just stay on this heading, at this current airspeed, at least for me, we'll be there in 7 minutes and 12 seconds, and we're currently 52 miles away from it. And that information's at the bottom right of your HUD.
The other symbol we have now is the position of the nose, as well across the plus symbol with the opening in the middle, and that shows you your angle of attack as well. So you see the plus right in the middle of your HUD, up near the top. That's where your nose is pointed, and then your meatball, as you call it, or flight path marker, is where your plane is traveling. So your plane is actually traveling with your nose up in the air about 3.5 degrees, depending on your speed.
Where is that exactly on the HUD?
Right in the middle above the meatball, the flight path marker. There's it looks like a cross, but it doesn't have the center part of the cross.
Oh, roger. Okay, and that is also your gun cross. That's also...
Well, yeah, well, it's where your nose is pointed.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily where your bullets will end up, but that's where your nose. So what people use that for is, one, where you can tell your angle of attack sort of roughly, and two, when you're doing a takeoff roll, you put that nose indicator on 10 degrees and then just fly it off the runway. And you can't go above 14 because then you'll drag your nozzle on the back of the runway.
She said.
So are we done here?
We're pretty much done. Now what I want to do is, we're going to wait for the other flight to finish, then we're going to do weapons, and we're going to go through air-to-air modes, ground modes, and
Check right, Morph.
CCIP, CCRP. So is there anything else
Alrighty.
that you guys, any questions about all the stuff we just went over?
Yeah, can you go back over the first hour and 20 minutes?
I can't, but I did fraps it, so you can watch it.
Sweet, okay, because I totally slept through.
Yeah, it's fine. I frapsed everything, and we're also going to fraps the next part of the training. So for now, I'm gonna stop the fraps